What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of 10 Things I Like here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am Spencer Kyte, friendly neighborhood Spencer man, your host for this adventure as we dive into UFC Vegas 70, which takes place this weekend at the UFC Apex, headlined by a light heavyweight fight between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. Some other interesting stuff on the card, and we're going to get right into it. The things that I like. Item number one, Ryan Spann's next challenge. As I talked about yesterday, Spann is a guy that I have always had a little bit, maybe not a soft spot, but a curiosity with, because I think from a measurable standpoint and a foundational pieces standpoint, he's a guy that I look at and I just think there's world championship potential here. 6'5", power in both hands, good wrestling, good submission game. The thing that comes from a great camp at Fortis MMA. And it felt like the thing that was always missing, or the thing that maybe still is missing, or may forever be missing, is just the mental side of it, just the focus side of it, the understanding what to do in dangerous situations part of it. It's almost the processing part of it, right? Where you're not thinking, or where the experience is caught up to those skills. Over his last couple fights, we've seen Spann get through some of those moments that in the past might have created little pieces of hesitation or little avenues for his opponent to get a victory. If you think back to the Johnny Walker fight, he had Johnny Walker rocked in a couple of instances in that fight, but then made poor decisions and put himself in a spot for Johnny Walker to land those sort of sideways Hapa elbows, Travis Brown elbows along the fence that ended up putting Ryan Spann out. Against Iwan Cutelaba and against Dominic Reyes, we didn't see those mistakes. There was actually a point in one of those fights where he motioned over to the corner and audibly shouted at Sayif Saud, "I got this. I know what to do." And I think maybe if Ryan Spann has put that in place and those things are real, he's a guy that might be able to make a little run here at light heavyweight and become interesting. And it's why I like this fight against Nikita Krylov on Saturday. Krylov is someone that has been around for a long time, still only 31 years old though, putting it together himself, looked good in each of his last two outings, bounced Alexander Gustafsson in London, and then fought Volkan Ozdemir to a decision in Abu Dhabi in October. Those are good wins. He's fought good competition. He is the litmus test in this division. He's the guy that if you're meant to go forward, you beat him. And if you're not, you don't, and you go backwards. And so I'm really interested in seeing whether Ryan Spann can pass this test, whether he can clear this hurdle, because these are the spots, and I would say it's maybe even maybe one step further ahead than this, that he's stumbled. But in order to get back to that test, he's got to get through this one on Saturday. I think he's there. My prediction, my forecast, to tease a little bit of what'll come on the Severe Picks and Plays with myself and Ian later in the week, and on the preview show with myself, Ian, and Harry that is out now, is that he gets this done, that he is there, that these changes and this growth and development is real, but we don't know for sure until we see it on Saturday. Item two, an Andre Muniz sighting. As I said yesterday, Muniz is a guy that going into last year, he felt on the cusp of challenging for the title in the middleweight division. He was on a 4-fight winning streak. He had broken Jacare's arm earlier in the year, closed out the year by submitting Eric Anders to make it 3 straight first-round submission wins, all by armbar. He had that Damian Maia when he was rolling sense to him, vibe to him, where it just felt like this is a guy that's just going to keep gunning through people and you can't stop his jiu-jitsu, and he's going to develop to the point where he's challenging for the title. As I said yesterday, Sean, Ian, and myself taped an episode of The Contender that you can find on the Patreon about Andre Muniz, thinking he would get that far. Then last year, he has the fight with Uriah Hall. It's not great. Lots of back control, but little damage, little effort in terms of little success, I should say, in terms of finding a submission or even threatening with submissions. And then he didn't fight for the rest of the year. And he seems to me like he has fallen out of the conversation in this division because different people have stepped up. Other people have rebounded. We've had a bunch of fights, and we've had a changing of the guard at the top of the division for that matter, with Alex Pereira ascending to the throne. But Muniz is back this weekend, and he gets Brendan Allen in a quality fight, and a fight that to me is one where he can recoup some of that buzz. He can reclaim some of that momentum, because Brendan Allen has done well enough in the UFC that a win on Saturday is a very good win for Andre Muniz, especially if he's able to get a finish and look good while he's in there, pushing his winning streak to 6, or his winning streak in the UFC, his record in the UFC, to 6-0, and his winning streak overall, I believe it would be to 9 or 10. And so I'm just curious to see, with a guy that I think myself and a lot of other people had big expectations for going into 2020, if he can sort of hit the reset button, get back to that to start 2023, build that momentum, build that excitement around himself back up to where it was at the start of last year, get another win, get himself into the conversation as a contender in the middleweight division. Item 3, Brendan Allen gets another chance to advance. I love this fight, love the co-main event, because it is that fight. It is one of those fights where no matter what happens, we're going to find out some different things about these two men that are competing on Saturday. Brendan Allen, as I said, is a very good fighter. He is 8-2 in the UFC. The losses are to Chris Curtis and to Sean Strickland. Beaten everybody else, has looked very good as of late in terms of the results, the technical elements. If you've listened to the takeaways and maybe the like visuals of it haven't been the best. I know Harry hasn't been a huge fan of some of his efforts, but at the end of the day, he's putting up victories. He's getting the wins that he needs. He's coming off a good win over Chris Jotko, and now he gets a chance to take another step forward. The thing that often gets lost, in my opinion, with Brendan Allen is that he's still pretty young, 27 years old. He's been doing this for a while. That's part of why it gets lost. This will be his 11th fight in the UFC. That's another piece of why it gets lost. And he feels like one of those younger veteran athletes that we expected to be further ahead a little bit too soon. And so I'm looking forward to this fight, because I think this is an opportunity where he can go out and beat a guy that's undefeated in the UFC, that's on a nice long winning streak, that had that buzz just last year, and advance himself into that conversation. Now, he's always going to be held up to a certain extent because of the losses already to Chris Curtis and Sean Strickland, but you can get those back. You can get beyond those. We've seen that numerous times from young fighters that lose to good fighters early, and then they move past them as they continue to advance, and those athletes recede a little bit. Chris Curtis, Sean Strickland, both in their 30s. Chris further into his 30s than even Sean is. And so Brendan Allen has more time to advance and shouldn't just be defined by those setbacks. And if he can go out on Saturday, and if he's the one that gets a dynamic finish, that has a dynamic performance, then maybe he's the one we come out of this weekend's fight card talking about as the name to track and the guy to pay attention to at middleweight going forward. Item 4, the return of Tatiana Suarez. This is one that I've been waiting for a long, long time. There were various points. Anytime it felt for a number of years, and Tatiana Suarez has been gone for over 3 years. Her last fight was in June of 2019. So she's gone the whole pandemic and then some. And it felt like every time she was mentioned on a fight card, I would tweet out, man, I hope Tatiana Suarez returns. Because while she was away, she felt like she was going to be the ultimate what if in the UFC. And we've had a few other athletes that probably are in that conversation and fit that bill. But for me, she felt like the ultimate one. Because shortly before she exited, 2 fights before she exited, she absolutely dominated Carla Esparza. Went out there and just out-wrestled the former champion, finished her, and it was just that coming out moment where you were like, this is the person that is going to be a champion. This is somebody we need to be paying ultra close attention to and learning everything we can about, because she is going to be a pillar of this promotion for the next several years. She got a win over Nina Nunes after that, but has been out since with different injuries, different illnesses, different problems. And now she's finally back. She has moved up a division. She's going to be fighting it at flyweight this weekend, taking on Montana De La Rosa. And I'm pumped. I said yesterday, or I asked yesterday, what's reasonable to expect? And the thing for me right now that I'm trying desperately to do is to have no expectations. I'm just happy to see Tatiana Suarez back, because for a while it felt like she wasn't going to be back. So for right now, going into Saturday, I'm just happy that she's here. I'm just happy that we get to see her compete. I want to see how she looks when she's in there. I want to see if it's the old Tatiana Suarez that we remember, what she's added, what she's developed, how she moves in the cage, because one of the things she was out with was a knee injury. Montana De La Rosa is a good test. It's a good measuring stick. It'll let us know where she's at and then kind of what to potentially expect going forward. But for right now, it's just welcome back, Tatiana Suarez. Glad you're here again. Item number 5. Mike Malott is back. So, Mike Malott is from Waterdown, Ontario, which is a very small town outside of Hamilton. I went to high school in Hamilton. He trains at Niagara Top Team. I was born and raised in St. Catharines, Ontario. Mike Malott and I have a lot of crossover. And so he's a guy I'm always going to be excited to see. We talked before this fight. Story is up now on UFC.com. We had a few laughs about sort of the path of a Canadian kid that at 12, 13, going to a private school whose tennis courts I used to sneak my way onto in the summers. He said, I want to be a fighter. And it was just this odd thing in Canada, here in Canada. If you're an 11, 12, 13-year-old kid and you say, I'm going to play in the NHL one day, nobody really bats an eye because we know that the path is there. We've seen it for so many people. Couple of degrees of separation at most. You could name somebody that advanced or was drafted or played in the NHL. Mike Malott's own brother, his younger brother, Jeff, is in the NHL as we speak with the Winnipeg Jets. So that wouldn't have been rare. But here's this kid at a prep school, Hillfield Strathallan College, that says, I'm going to be a UFC fighter. And there's no real avenue. There's no immediate understanding of where to go and how to make this happen. And he says, well, I'm going to figure it out. And lo and behold, all these years later, he's figured it out. Not only that, he earned his way to the UFC with a dominant performance on the Contender Series a couple seasons back, stopping Szymon Smitrynski in the first round. And then in his promotional debut last year, he goes out and he flatlines Mickey Gall. And it's a great win. And he hasn't fought since. And it's felt like a shame. The first thing I asked him when we sat down to talk was, where you been, man? And he just started laughing because he's been dying to be back in there. He steps in with another Canadian, Johan Linnaeus, on Saturday. I don't like the two Canadians fighting each other, but I am happy to see proper Mike Malott back in action. I want to see the development and the improvement and all the things he's worked on since moving back to Ontario and sort of setting up with a few different camps, working with a few different people, and just happy to see my guy back out there, right? I'm certainly unbiased when it comes to being able to speak about his game, speak about where he's at and sort of the how far he could go in this division. But look, we all have people that we root for. We all have ties to different individuals. This is a Hamilton dude. This is a guy that went to a school that I know deeply, that I have friends that went to. One of my first crushes went there. She wanted no part of me, but that's fine. She was still worthy of the crush. And so I'm always going to root for him. I'm happy to see him back. I love supporting the Canadians. I dislike, as I said, having these two guys fight each other, but I'm glad to see Mike Malott back, and I want to see what he can do in his sophomore appearance. Item 6, third start for Jasmine Jasudavicius, teammate of Mike Malott at Niagara Top Team, coming off a loss to Natalia Silva in a fight that at the time I thought was a tough loss for Jasmine Jasudavicius, because it was one of those you lost to a newcomer who hadn't fought in, I believe, 3 years at the time and hadn't really fought too much great competition or good competition on the way up. But as it turns out, Natalia Silva is really good. She deserves to be part of this young ascending pack flyweight, which makes that loss not as bad for Jazz. Now she gets this opportunity, gets another newcomer in Gabriela Fernandez, another Brazilian, and it's just a chance. It's a third fight. So she wins the first one against Kate Hansen. It's a good but not great performance. It's gritty, it's grindy, it's all the things that Jazz is as a fighter. Now's the third opportunity. We've got the win, we've got the loss, we've got the good, we've got the bad. We can call it even, and let's see where we go from here. As I said yesterday, I think there's some talent here. I think there's some upside here. She's 31 years old, but doesn't have a lot of experience, doesn't have a lot of miles on her. Let's see what we can get to. Again, similar to the Malott thing, I am always going to be invested and interested in Canadians as a Canadian guy, the same way all the Irish lads here are invested when we get to international things in all of the Irish fighters, more so than anyone else. You root for the flag, and I'm going to root for the flag. And these people are from regions that I'm from and areas where I grew up. So that pulls at me a little bit more. I think there's talent there with Jasmine Jasudavicius. Let's see it on Saturday. Item 7. Joe Solecki gets a chance to break out. As I said yesterday, he is a guy that I sort of have always felt like he's been good, but for me, it feels like there's a little bit more. And I've always wanted to see it, and we just haven't quite seen it. It's always been good performances, very good in some instances. The win over Jim Miller is a very good win. But for the most part, I've come away feeling like there's just that little bit more, that next corner that he can turn to take things to the next level. With all due respect to Carl Deaton III, his opponent on Saturday, I think he's overmatched. I think Joe Solecki is a better fighter. And I think this is a chance for Solecki to come in and maybe get that kind of breakout win and take that next step forward and show that I'm not crazy. Show that there is that next tier that he can get to. And now maybe beating Carl Denton in convincing fashion isn't emblematic of that next tier. Maybe it's just doing what you need to do and doing what you're capable of against a lesser opponent. But even that is important, right? That's another one of those things that we talk about all the time with these fighters. If you are the UFC stalwart and you get a short notice opponent like this that doesn't have the experience, that isn't used to being on this stage, the best thing you can do for yourself is absolutely show out. I want to see if Joe Solecki can do it. I've been thinking through 5 fights that this guy's got the potential to show out at some point and make a little run and be somebody that we need to pay attention to in the lightweight division. And we'll see if it happens on Saturday. Item number 8. Charles Johnson turns it around quickly. Energy fought earlier this year against Jimmy Flick, got a victory. He fought Zhalgas Zhumagulov last year to get his first UFC win, lost his debut to Muhammad Mokaev, and here he is right back at it, jumping into a short notice opportunity against O'Day Osborne, just looking to capitalize and make the most of these things. And I got to tell you, I absolutely am here for it. Johnson is someone that on his way up and coming into the UFC, if you go back and listen to that summer preview show for the summer London card, the July London card, we all talked about Charles Johnson and said, this is a guy that's a good test for Mokaev. He's got some experience. He's a former LFA champion. He fought good competition, lost that fight, but pushed Mo to a decision. And I think that showed a bunch of people what he's capable of. Split decision win over Zhumagulov, close fight, had some good moments, had some not so good moments, looked very good last time out against Jimmy Flick and getting a finish there. I think similar a little bit to the Jasudavicius point, he's settled in now, right? He's 3 fights in. He's settled in. The lights of the UFC, the expectations of everything that goes with getting ready for a UFC fight, because it's not just the training camp. It's then getting to wherever it is you're traveling to and going through media and weigh-ins and it being a just bigger production takes some time to get used to. And I think Charles Johnson, to me, it feels like he's settled into that. He's gotten comfortable with that. And he's making this turnaround because he knows he can advance a little further if he just stays on the gas, right? We saw it a bunch through the pandemic when it was mostly fights at the apex, and we saw fighters like Kevin Holland to the absolute extreme extent fight a bunch of times, stay ready, stay active, and make the most of it. I think Charles Johnson is trying to do the same. I think he has the experience and the skills to take full advantage of this and turn this into a move towards the top 15 in the flyweight division. I'm really looking forward to seeing this fight on Saturday. Item number 9, Nurullo Aliyev makes his debut. Takes on Rafael Alves. It's a dangerous fight. Talked last week about Jamal Emmers and Hussein Ashkabov. That obviously played out in Emmers' favor. Gives Ashkabov the first loss of his career. Aliyev comes in this position in the Ashkabov position. 8-0 through his career, 23 years old, looked very good on the Contender Series and getting a win there. First round finish towards the end of that first round. Got a takedown about a minute in, 90 seconds in. Spent some time getting into the right positions and roughing his opponent up a little bit from inside his guard. Finally, with a minute left in the round, postures up, gets to half, and just pounds, just dominates. And it's great. It's a very good finish. If this kid can come out and get through Rafael Alves in his debut, that tells you something. It tells me something. It may not tell you something, but I will then tell you on Tuesday that it means something. Because Alves is tough. It's been in there with 3 good opponents in the UFC. Damir Ismagulov, Mark Jacasey, Drew Dober. Beat Jacasey by submission. Got him quick. Got him out of there in a hurry. Fought Dober tough. Lost that fight in the 3rd round. Fought Ismagulov tough. Lost that fight by decision. Those are all good competition. Those are all good opponents. And so if Aliyev can go out there and get a victory in his debut, stay undefeated, keep moving forward, might be somebody we gotta pay attention to and start talking about a little bit, or just note that he's there. Just a little like, don't forget about this guy, to where I'll be reminding you of him going into his sophomore debut. But you got to get through the first one first. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. Last one, number 10. The class of 22 representatives continue to arrive. This weekend is another run of Dana White's Contender Series competitors. Thus far, they have done pretty well. Truth be told, the class of 22, as I will call them, they will always be known by the great graduating class. It is the easiest way to do it. So far, this group from season 6 is 15-6 in the UFC. 16-6 in the UFC. That's pretty solid. And we get a few more making their appearances this weekend. Aliyev is one of them. Haley Cowan makes her debut. Jose Johnson is on this card. Trevor Peake is on this card as well in the opener against Eric Gonzalez. Esteban Ribovac was supposed to be on this card as well. Currently without an opponent, may get one. We're not sure. Sorry, he's on next week's card. I get confused sometimes because I'm often working ahead. I'm working ahead on UFC 285. He's on next week's card, not this week's card. But we get another group of these fighters from this class that so far have done well. Nurullo Aliyev is the one that's in the toughest against Alves. Everybody else, to my expectation, to my understanding, has a pretty winnable fight, or at least an even fight, a competitive fight, but a winnable fight. And so I just want to keep seeing. The reason I know this stuff about the record so far this year and it being 16-6 is because I like tracking this stuff. I want to know this stuff so that when we get talking about Contender Series and it's not generating talent or it's whatever, I have the data to counter that or to agree with that if that is what the case is. And what we're seeing so far, what I'm seeing from putting this data together, is that while the first couple seasons, the records ended up coming out mostly pretty close to 500, if you get 1 or 2 or 3 fighters that can move forward and be consistent ranked talents, then that's the win. That's all you need. That's all you're looking for in this. If you then get a bunch of, roster depth, for lack of a better term, that's a positive too. And I know that's not what people want to hear, because everybody wants to get mad that they're bringing in these inexperienced, underpaid fighters to get rid of veteran names that they, in those moments, care about, but didn't while they were competing. Fine. This happens everywhere. It happens in every industry. It happens in every sport. And the UFC has proven, and this so far, I mean, Jamal Hill's ascent to the title proves that this is proof of concept, that you can find inexperienced but emerging talents, bring them into the UFC, get them opportunities, and maybe get lightning in a bottle 1, 2, 3 times. Jamal Hill has a title. Sean O'Malley's on the cusp. Jeff Neal is fighting next week in a huge fight. We've got other people that are in that mix as well. The Brazil season produced some good competitors, including Tyler Santos, who fought for a title. Alex Perez fought for a title off season 1. Like, it's worked out so far. And thus far, season 6, the group from last year, the class of 22, has had a bunch of early success. Now, obviously way too early to figure out and to decide if this group is going to produce a Jamal Hill or a Jeff Neal or an Adrian Yanez. But the only way to find out is to get these men and women in the octagon. And so for me, as somebody that just wants to watch fights and chronicle these journeys and see what becomes of these athletes, because I covered them on Contender Series and they're here now, I'm looking forward to it. I know this isn't the biggest card. We've got the big card next weekend, and that's the other thing. And I'm just going to touch on it quick because I know everybody is used to me saying it. We don't get UFC 285 without a card like this or a card like last weekend. We don't get these massive pay-per-views and these great fight night shows or these events that end up on ABC without these lesser cards. That's the trade-off. They can't all be bangers. This isn't Kendall Roy's birthday party where the playlist is all bangers all night. It can't be that way. There has to be trade-off. Could last week have been better? Absolutely. It would have been better if Corey Sandhagen and Marlon Vera didn't get pulled and moved to San Antonio. Now, I'm happy that it got pulled. I'm glad it's going to be in front of fans. It's a fight that deserves to be in front of fans. But it certainly would have bolstered last week's card. This week's card is pretty solid. It's pretty good. Next week's card is goddamn amazing. And the reason we get amazing is because we get pretty good, pretty solid this week and not so great last week. Everything works together. They can't all be hits. They can't all be home runs. Sometimes it's got to be just a single into the gap, just a single hit behind the guy as the runner's in motion. That's it for me. That's it for this week for 10 Things. As I said earlier, Ian and I will be back tomorrow with the Severe Picks and Plays. Ian, myself, and Harry will be around with the preview show. Loads of content right now here on the YouTube channel as the boys are covering the Bellator London event as well. Check it out. Check out the Patreon, SevereMMA.com/pints. Follow everybody on Twitter. Follow me at Spencer Kyte. Like this post. Subscribe to this channel. Leave us a comment if you would like. I hope this has given you a few things that you're interested in or now more interested in for Saturday. I do think this is a fun little fight card leading into what should be an amazing night next weekend at UFC 285. Until then, I'm Spencer Kyte. We'll see you tomorrow. Love you all.